by MSNBC military analyst, retired four-star General Barry McCaffrey, commanded an infantry division during the 1991 Gulf War to liberate Kuwait following the invasion by Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. Gail Lamont is also with me, senior fellow at the Nonpartisan Council on Foreign Relations, also the author of Ashley's War, the untold story of a team of women soldiers on the special ops battlefield, and John Feary, Republican strategist. John, let me start with you. I want to put some numbers up. Back in April, there was this poll that was conducted, an NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. 61% of voters gave Donald Trump, gave him poor marks. 64% poor marks for being able to deal with an international crisis. Do those numbers change at all after what we just heard there, John?
That's a real question, Craig, and I don't know the answer to that. I think that Trump was trying to put some meat on the bones of his campaign speeches, trying to put some, internal integrity to those things, and it was really a realpolitik type of speech. The idea that America can't do this alone, we can't afford to go alone anymore, the idea of burden sharing, the idea that we're not going to blunder into another Iraq war, which I think is somewhat popular with a lot of Republican voters. The question is, does he have enough experience, and can he put people around him who have experience? When Donald Trump said that he's his own foreign policy advisor, he really hurt himself with most people who care about foreign policy. He's got to surround himself with people who know what the hell they're talking about, and I think that would help him immeasurably.
General, what's your reaction? What's your takeaway from what we just heard?
Well, I probably have a different viewpoint. Mr. Trump, over the last year, has said some of the most irresponsible, inane statements on foreign policy, defense policy that I've ever heard in public life. This speech, I thought he hit it out of the ballpark. Now, there's some things you can argue about, but from a domestic political viewpoint, I think it was very powerful, very sensible. The Saudis are going to like what they heard, the Egyptians, the Russians, maybe the Chinese. So I thought he did a tremendous job, and I think the notion of him being the junkyard dog that arrives in Washington is the one that's been propelling him to popularity. This tended to mute that and say, hey, wait a minute, I'm a person of peace and I understand what I'm doing. So I thought it was a very significant presentation.
Gail, for us, we listened to a lot of these Trump speeches. A lot of it was rehash. We didn't get a lot of new stuff. There weren't a lot of specifics in there from the Republican. What do you think our friends abroad, whether they be prime ministers or heads of state, what do you think they took away from what we just heard?
I think in a lot of ways this speech was a Rorschach test, right? People were looking for certain things. Some nations were looking for certain reassurances. I think for the Europeans it would be a cause for concern in talking about looking at alliances. I think for the Saudis and some others, the Russians, it actually might have, as the general said, given some cause for reassurance. But it was really an outsider's foreign policy speech. It was not aimed at think tank elites. It was aimed at people who either already agreed and were in Camp Trump, or people who were looking for reassurances that he would govern reasonably. And I think what is fascinating is, in some ways, we've had a presidential candidate who ran as rethinking NAFTA, reining in American interventions overseas, and really thinking about curbing American interventions abroad, right? And that was President Obama, right? So I think a lot of what we heard is stuff that we have heard before from outsiders. And really, people will take from this speech a lot of what they wanted to hear in it. And I think it's fascinating to hear a foreign policy based both on strength and on unpredictability be one that presidential candidate Trump rides into November.